Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 3, Undertaking the Colts. We are going to be dissecting this evening what we saw on Sunday. Pretty much go through what the not just statistics, but more or less how we saw the performance and good, bad, ugly, and pretty much anything in between. So right now, I'd like to introduce my guest tonight. He is a longtime friend of mine, diehard Colts fan as I am, and very well knows this team probably as well, maybe even better than I do. JB or Jordan Brock, how you doing, bud?
Good man, good man. Appreciate the invite here. This is my first foray into podcasting, so looking forward to it. Saw a lot of good things Sunday, so looking forward to speaking about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully you don't not doing a lot of stuttering or hesitating as I tend to do. I mean, but
I feel like I've gotten used to these Zoom calls and Teams calls enough that hopefully I hold myself together here.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, the COVID pandemic really got everybody this whole like audio visual meeting and conferencing, so should be a breeze.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, let's not dilly dally around this much more. Let's get into it. So we had 1 o'clock kickoff on Sunday. Colts hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars, the defending AFC South champions. What many project to be the two-time AFC South champions. Final score of that one: Jags 31, Colts 21. Jordan, if you would just go ahead and give me like, what did you think, man? I saw quite a few things that I could be nitpicky about, but overall, I want to say that this was really, really encouraging.
Yeah, I agree, Blake. I mean, overarching thoughts here. The team is way more competitive than I thought they were going to be honest with you. I know I didn't get to hop on last week when you were doing the preview, but I had a lot of thoughts on where the roster was at and kind of what we looked like in some key positions that I really thought we were going to struggle. I was impressed with our offense. I know that there's not a lot to beat from last year, but I really had low expectations for them starting out, and I think they exceeded those in some areas. Some I have some thoughts here that I'll share later, but overarching thoughts, definitely thought that our team looked very well prepared, which was a nice change from the last couple of years, in my opinion. Um, I can kind of dive in here to some more deeper thoughts and what I liked and disliked. But overall, positive for the future. I think we're going to be more competitive in a lot of games than I thought prior to Sunday. So,
Yeah, you know, I want to say that I expected. I don't want to say I expected us to lose this game because in the previous episode, I actually picked the Colts to win 20-17 on a last second field goal. And the way that the game was going with how low scoring and how both offenses were more or less not really efficiently moving the ball consistently, I was kind of thinking that it was going to look like that. It was kind of going towards because the Colts were up, I believe, 21-17 at one point. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, Jacksonville comes back. They may end up, getting a touchdown or trying to go for the 2-point conversion. I'm doing a lot of math and scenarios in my head.
mm,
And I'm like, end of the third quarter rolls around and we're ahead. And I'm like, our defense has been playing stout all game. If we can just maintain Calvin Ridley and keep Trevor Lawrence in the pocket, why can't we pull out of this game with the score as is?
yeah, no, I agree. And I should have clarified. I was not overly impressed with the offense, but I was impressed with a few players. But I agree with you. I had the Jaguars losing this game. I had the Colts winning. I did not, like I said, I didn't get a chance to come on last week, but I had the Colts at 7-10, which is probably a little bit better than what a lot of people thought. But we've had the Jags number at home, so I had it as a win too. To be honest with you, after that first drive, I was feeling a little skittish. I've got these, I should have been trained from the last 15 years of Peyton Manning prior to the Luck era, for some stability. But the Frank Reich era has really brought out the inner IU basketball and IU football fan in me. So I'm just ready. I'm waiting for the bottom to fall out at any point. So
Dude,
when we were
that
up
is
twenty-one
that is the
seventeen,
absolute truth. I mean, outside of 2018, from 2019 through the 2022 seasons, it was exactly that. The Colts would, excuse me, get out to a lead, and then exactly, you're right. The bottom would fall out, and we would, the game would be tied with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter or whatever, and Andrew Luck had to save us,
Mhm.
or um,
Well, it was almost a flip flop in the eras, right? With Pagano, it was we were coming back. Pagano and Arians were coming back in every game,
yeah,
and
all the
then
time.
when Wright came around, it was like you never really knew if they were going to put up a fight or kind of fall apart at the end. So,
Well, that
like you
that to
said, the fact that
me
we were,
that to me kind of brings up a point to where we can start transitioning into the game, because I noticed this too. So with in the Frank Reich era, at to your point, once we got after halftime, midway into the third quarter, it was like, well, okay, cool, your offense is now off script, no longer running the 30, 40 plays that they had scripted out coming into the game. And it's like, okay, now you actually have to read what the defense is giving you and call a
Mhm.
game based off that. And it didn't seem like Frank Reich or any, of the offensive coordinators that we had, whether it would be, Nick Sirianni, which now he's on at Philadelphia as their head coach, or Marcus Brady last year. It didn't seem like anybody who was controlling the offense couldn't go off script very well. And that
yeah,
was the ultimate Achilles heel. And without a quarterback like Andrew Luck to really engineer an offensively winning drive or sustained drive, we were just a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with a hurricane coming.
right,
So,
right, and I mean, to touch briefly on the Reich era, because I don't want to bury him. I mean, he was a good man and a
yeah,
good coach, but
bless up to him,
his
honestly.
his offense, his offensive play calling style was very repetitive. Whereas I felt like even in, the four quarters we saw on Sunday, Steichen is very creative in how he chooses to run his offense. So, I feel like sometimes you see spread offenses that are death by a thousand cuts. They try to run, out in the flat with the running back, swing passes, things like that.
All
Um,
2007 Patriots.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like Steichen is very creative. You never really know what direction he's going in, and I think that's what makes him a great coordinator. So I definitely saw a lot in this game to be excited for on the offensive side of the ball in terms of long term. I
Yeah,
don't know that we have the personnel right now for to be competitive, but we definitely saw Anthony Richardson be way more polished than I ever expected him to be in his first NFL game.
I think that is the best way to put it, is that polished, and because he was, the moment did not get too big for him, regardless of score or regardless of play call or situation. I mean, right? I mean, I've got it right in front of me. Anthony Richardson finished 24 of 37 for a 64.8% completion percentage, which, I mean, you can round that up to 65 if you so please. 223 passing yards, touchdown pick. Um, and then on the ground with his legs, 10 carries for 40 yards with that long of 12 yards in the first half, which is that play right there is where apparently he got his left knee bruised a little bit and he came up hobbling for a second. But
Right.
here is where I think can be really put into perspective in terms of positivity and what we have at the quarterback position. So Anthony Richardson ended up taking 4 sacks total on the stat line. But in terms of sack yards lost, that's only 8 yards that we took. Whereas
Right.
4 sacks last year with Matt Ryan or Sam Ellinger in the pocket or whomever, 4 sacks would have been 20, 30 yards because their stats.
With Matt Ryan, at least.
Yeah. It scared me because I thought he was about to get killed back there a couple of times. But
Yeah.
averaging 2 yards lost per sack is not killer at all. Whereas like you take a 10-yard sack and it's like basically getting a false start or an off, some sort of penalty right out of the gate, right?
Hmm.
So only losing a couple of yards, that's easy ground to make up. And with the play calling ability of Steichen, and you were seeing this as a lot too, and I think we talked about this, is he was bringing several guys in motion on a singular play. Where I saw one, I think it was, they were lined up, and I'm trying to remember the type of formation it was. It wasn't like a wishbone, but it was, so you had Anthony Richardson, and then he had a tight end to his right, and then I think Evan Hall back or either way, it could have been flip flop. But they brought Downs or Granson in motion back, and then they swung them back out.
Hmm.
And I saw, and a lot of that was more or less, I think, to give Richardson the visual of what defense they were in. Because I mean, if it's man to man coverage, that linebacker or that safety that's coming down is going to follow that motion man both inside and out. Whereas if it's zone, he's only going to glide in a little bit. So I think he was doing a lot
Right.
of that to help Richardson, and it definitely paid off because Anthony Richardson only completed 53.8% passes at Florida in those 13 starts, which has been, those stats have been shoved down our throat over and over and over again in the national media. But for him to come out and complete 11% more than his career total from college to the NFL, I think that's not saying something to not just Anthony Richardson as a quarterback and as a passer and as a game dissector, game manager, but the play calling ability and the coaching. I think that has been taken up not one, not two, but three full notches this year. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I mean, I think you alluded to it earlier as we started. They leaned on that short passing game to start out to get him comfortable. And in terms of the stat line, I'm extremely impressed. I mean, I think that is a fantastic stat line for a rookie, like you mentioned. I mean, he's played what this was his 14th started game in the last 4 years or something like that
Mhm.
in football. I mean, that's impressive for him to come out and throw for 223 yards, in my opinion. But like we mentioned, the short passing to help him get comfortable. I think you're right. You're spot on. Jim Bob Cooter, I think, is a great quarterback coach, an offensive coordinator. He's a guy who can really take a quarterback under his wing and teach him how to make the reads and throw the ball in the right spot. You know, if there was one knock on Anthony, I would say he's got to find that touch. And I think the broadcast was talking about it, even though that broadcast was pretty rough to listen to at times. I think they alluded to, he's throwing some of these short passes 100 miles an hour, and that's
Right.
just excitement, adrenaline. Um, he'll get that cleaned up, but in terms of the interception, man, I don't even think that's on him. I think that was a broken play. I think Mo Alley Cox ran the wrong route. We had two guys in the exact same spot with Pittman Jr. So
Yeah,
I'm not even
I was.
putting that on him.
I'm glad you brought up that play because I was actually going to get into it. I watched that play a little bit more today, and it's I've heard it called several things, but the concept that stuck to me, and I learned this from talking from I lived out in New Mexico for a little while, and it was called this both at Eastern New Mexico University and Texas Tech. I talked to a couple folks out there once upon a time, but it's called a smite concept. So what that means is it's used to basically give the quarterback a progression of where to look. Okay, so smite, SMITE, you go short, middle of the field, right? So that's where you're starting. That's where your first read needs to go to. Now, based on the defense, that's when you elevate to the next level. So intermediate, tall to extension, meaning past the safeties, right? So everything was flowing to the left side of the field on that one. So I'm trying to remember the exact formation, but I believe they had tight end, two receivers, and then they had a running back come out of the backfield on that one. So your short to middle of the field is you look, see if your running back or your short out is there, or if a crosser is coming back that's not getting picked up. But then that intermediate to extended is where Mo Alley Cox and Pittman come in because they are both supposed to go to the outside. And I think that you were correct on that. They got their spacing incorrect because they were only about
Mhm.
3 to 4 yards apart.
Right.
But for that concept to work, you need it to be anywhere from 7 to 10 yards apart because running that same route combination forces the defense to choose who to cover, right?
Right.
So they were playing, Jacksonville was playing a too high safety pretty much all game. So that safety, if they're running that too high on that play, they're immediately going to take out that extended route. So that's where you need to look short to intermediate. And that's where I think he was trying to go, is that intermediate to Mo Alley Cox. And as Richardson said, it was a flat throw, needed, as you alluded to, needs to get just a little bit more touch on it because Richardson said it too. He's not in college anymore. You can't fit that type of pass in that
Right.
window anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's interesting because that's not a concept that I'd heard of. So that's good to know. I I thought it was a broken play in the fact that they ran too close to each other. But I think when you get three defenders, three defenders, two offensive playmakers there, it's going to be difficult to fit it in that tight of a window. So that's good to know. And I think, like I said, I don't think I don't put too much stock in that interception, and it came at an inopportune time. I think it definitely swung the momentum of the game. But those are the kind of mistakes we want him making this year.
Oh yeah,
Moving into the future, learn from that kind of thing. He seems like the kind of guy who's a student. They always say student of the game. I think he's a student of the game. He's going to take that, learn from it, and we won't see that mistake very often anymore.
no, and I mean, if I wouldn't be shocked if we see a type of mistake like that once or twice more. But again, that's part of the evolution process. That's a part of his learning. But you know, what really impressed me most was just how he bounced back too, and even down 10 points. Final Colts drive before Gardner Minshew came in. The effort and determination that he had to still get us back in the game and still go for that win. That is an energy that was missing all of last year, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Richardson is okay. And Trevor Lawrence said something to him after the game, like, "Hey, you got to know when to protect yourself in this league because you can't keep lowering your shoulder like that and expect to play 17 games." And he's absolutely right. So, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, "All right, well, Richardson, you just need to not do that." No, like that's what you brought him in here for, is to make those type of extended plays and to make that effort. But you got to be smart about it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I kind of had that on my notes for storylines to pay attention to. Moving forward, I think he's got to learn how to take hits, run the ball effectively down the field as an offensive tool, because being a dual threat, capable quarterback in the NFL, I mean, it sets you apart from pretty much three-quarters of the teams, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Josh Allen. Mahomes isn't super speedy, but boy, does that guy know how to move around in the pocket. And being able to use your legs is critical. And I think he will learn. There's an effective way to move the ball down the field without putting yourself in danger. Josh Allen is he's maybe not the perfect example to follow because sometimes he puts himself. I saw last night Sean McDermott, was yelling at him, telling him to step out of bounds. But,
Yep.
he finds ways to get extra yardage and minimize the contact, So we want AR. I'm okay with him getting hit because he's 6'5", 250. But, I'm not okay with him lowering his shoulder and putting himself in danger like that. So that was one thing that I would like to see go away. It was cool to see it at the end of the game there, seeing him try to make the play, but then everybody I think collectively held their breath and was a little bit nervous.
Yeah,
But
I
one
watching on TV, I just felt the air go out of the stadium, and I
yeah.
just kind of sucked my head. I was like, "Oh no, please no."
Well, one thing. So speaking of that last drive, one thing I wanted to see if you noticed. So, I was very impressed with his poise and command of the offense in general. The whole game, he had some struggles there in the late third. Most of the fourth quarter, but his poise and command of the offense. He had the boys on the same page the entire game. And what I thought was really interesting towards the end of the game was on that last drive. I don't know if you saw his play card at one point came out of his holder
Yeah, he
on his
just
wrist,
chucked it.
and he just
Finally,
chucked it. He's like, I don't care, man. Just tell it to me. Like he's gonna figure it out. He wants to go make the play. So I think that that type of grit really shows you know the capability of who we've got here.
yeah, I completely 100% agree. So I'm trying to think here with Anthony Richardson. I mean, I do agree to an extent where, and it's really hard, right? Because we as Colts fans are traumatized by Andrew Luck and him getting hurt, and all I can think about is that Denver game, right? All the way
Hmm.
back, what was it, 2017, 29, or no, 2019 or sometime like that, when it was like a lacerated kidney and he had busted ribs and everything. And I don't, I don't want that happening to this young kid because he is so talented and there's just so much going for him, right? But,
Yeah.
we as Colts fans we want something so bad. And, we've been messed with, if you will, because of this veteran quarterback carousel that we've been on for the better part of 4 seasons now.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and that as Colts fans, we're just craving somebody who, is not a statue in the pocket. I mean, Philip Rivers did a lot of great things in his one season for the Colts, but moving around was not one of them. And Matt Ryan was kind of in the same boat. So I think the mobility excites me, and I'm completely guilty. On Sunday, I'm like, just run with it, go for the first down. But it's like you forget like these dudes, Jacksonville's got a good defense, and some of those guys,
Yeah.
like Josh Allen, could take somebody's head off. I think at one point he about put Deion Jackson into the rafters on one of the plays. So, I mean, there's some dudes on that defense, and they could blow you up. So, we need him to be careful, be effective in the run game. I almost would like to see, and I think we saw it a little bit. You kind of mentioned that interception throw. I know it limits us to one side of the field, but I'd love to see some rollouts where, if we can get the right blocking in place, he can take off running.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a lot of room for improvement, but I think also, I listened to the official Colts podcast, and I think it was Matt Taylor alluded to, this offensive line is used to having stone, statues and back there that
Yeah.
they know exactly how much time they need to give. When you have a mobile quarterback, it really kind of throws a wrench in your cadence and your timing as an offensive line. They've already had enough struggles over the last 2 years, so I think they will also start to figure out like, maybe we push the defensive ends to the outside and give AR a lane down the middle to run if he needs it. They'll start to figure those things out. And obviously defenses are going to throw different, schemes at them. But, I think there's a lot to like and a lot to look forward to.
Yep. That's for sure. I mean, piggybacking off of Richardson's mobility, which is obviously evident, it having a lack of a true dynamic running back in the backfield kills. And as much as you and I liked Deion Jackson last year, and we still do like him. And Evan Hull actually showed quite a bit of spark, but he's now on IR, so he's
Am
going.
I crazy? Am I crazy or didn't Evan Holt, he had a big run at one point. Didn't it get called back on a penalty or
Yeah,
did he
he
make it
there
there?
was a hold, and because
Yeah.
he had busted it for I think about 15 yards, and
Yeah.
yeah, holding.
And of course, like the next play, or maybe it was even that play, he like comes up with a knee injury or something,
Yeah, I know. It's
naturally.
so unfortunate too because that. I mean, I called it too. When I did a couple episodes ago with Brian, and I even said something about this last episode too. Is that Evan Hull is one I predicted to flash. Him, Kylan Granson, and Josh Downs were my three big like young offensive pieces that I picked to click. And
Hmm.
the Evan Hull injury hurts because going when I was watching preseason games, I watched quite a bit of practice footage as well. Evan Hull, it reminds me of a much bigger Darren Sproles, but he has the ability to pick up that rush blitzer coming, whether it's a linebacker or a corner. And he did that, so like especially in Philadelphia. I think he stonewalled. I'm trying to remember who it was, but he stonewalled a linebacker that came flying through the B gap, and I was like, "Wow, okay, like this kid is something."
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head because when we were going to do our preview last week, and unfortunately I didn't get to join. I had him on there as one of my somebody I was excited to see play. I honestly thought he kind of got forced into duty this game because of how poorly Deion Jackson was playing.
Yeah.
But I really wish he would have got more run before that because that was the exact same thing stood out to me in the Philadelphia game. Asking running backs to pick up defensive rushers in the NFL is a difficult task.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can block, especially at his size, because he's not a huge guy,
No, he's only got
I
5'10", 5'11".
yeah, I mean he's got the potential. I hope he's not. I haven't seen anything. I don't know if you've seen anything. I haven't seen anything on his injury, so hopefully he's not out too long. Because
Yeah,
I'd love to
Colts
get him
actually just
back.
placed him on IR. It was
Did
either
they?
today or yesterday. So he's going to be out for
Man,
at least 4 games. Not season ending, thank goodness.
yeah.
But I mean, 4 games is 4 games. And with the running back room as thin as it is, I mean, Deion Jackson luckily is still healthy. But again, 13 carries, 14 yards, and 2 lost fumbles. Like,
Well, all three of them combined, what is it? 16 carries for 25 yards.
well,
I think Anthony had Anthony had 40 yards by himself. I mean,
yeah,
that's horrible. I know we're this is a positive podcast. We're going to try to remain positive, but the running game was atrocious.
yeah.
I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts with that one.
And, there was positives to come of it too, because I mean we've seen the ability of Deion Jackson before. Once he gets clicking, and then Zach Moss should be back health or relatively healthy for the Texans game coming up. And so, that'll give us some more experience in the backfield. And Zach Moss has proven to be an NFL capable starter. I wouldn't say high quality, but I think a capable starter is a good term to use for Zach Moss. And a decent running back, excuse me, will find just the littlest crevice and take advantage of it. Which I actually was watching several plays again, and there was a few of those design run plays that the O line actually had moved guys just enough for if Jonathan Taylor was back there, Jonathan Taylor would have found a way to slip through for 6, 7, maybe 8 yards. And that's
Yeah,
where that hurts.
yeah, and I agree completely. I mean, it's I have a hard time separating. I like Deion Jackson. I think he's a good player. I think he had a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
I do unfortunately think he's really hurt his stock here because he has basically had a 4 game audition to say, hey, are you a guy that we can rely on?
Yeah.
I think at this point the Colts are looking at as soon as Zach Moss can get back, like, you can't put the ball on the ground. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
JT's had his struggles there. You can't put the ball on the ground in the NFL. The possessions are too valuable in this league, and I don't know how much though I put on Deion Jackson. I mean, I don't even really count. I mean, Funk was in for 2 carries, 10 yards. He looked fine. I mean, he was in there for 2 plays, right, or
Yeah.
3 plays. Hole obviously got injured quick. I don't know how much of this I put on Deion Jackson because you know my observations with the offensive line. I thought the pass blocking was improved. Now, how much of that is Anthony Richardson's ability to move around in the pocket? But I was not impressed with our blocking offense. The line blocking. I mean, it just run blocking. Excuse me. I didn't think we were seeing, like you mentioned, that there was a few holes for half a second. Maybe somebody with Jonathan Taylor's top end speed can get through. With the running back stable that we've got right now, it's just not going to get it done. I don't know how much of it's the Jaguars' defensive line. I know they got a good defense, but I was kind of disappointed. I really hoped we would come out looking better in run blocking. I do think Tony Sperano Jr. is going to do a good job,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that was one of my takeaways in the kind of the negative column from this game. I was kind of disappointed with the run blocking and the offensive line really there in general.
Yeah. And again, this is only week one, right? So we're gonna
Right.
we're gonna see a bunch of improvement as the season goes on, and I fully expect this coming Sunday against the Texans, who are relatively speaking, and with all due respect, they're not Jacksonville's front seven, right? It's because Jacksonville's got what 3 or 4 first round picks or former first round picks up there. But Houston, they've got Will Anderson Jr., who I watched a couple of his highlights from Sunday. He flashed considerably, so I think they've got a stud there. But I sadly can't name many more of their starters on defense. So
Well, and giving the Jags a shout out, even though I think the Jags might be my least favorite team in our division, but
mm,
with how
that was
they've over the years
me.
they always seem to kill us in the most inopportune times. I know this one didn't really matter as much, but the playoffs a couple years ago, back in the I remember how many times Scobie beat Manning, but that's a conversation
Oh
for another
yeah,
day.
that brings
But
that's some nightmare fuel, is what that is.
but to give the Jags a little shine, that Fadukasi guy, the defensive tackle, I think he's a nose tackle for them. I mean, that guy was
He
unreal.
was
I mean, you
moving.
got to give credit. You got to give credit where credit's due.
Oh
I
gosh,
mean,
yes.
I don't know how much of it is on. You hope with Quentin Nelson that these guys can get some push, but when you got a guy like that, I mean, I told my wife, she was watching the game with me. I'm like, this guy reminds me of a guy who used to play for the Patriots named Vince Wilfork.
Whoa,
Patriots and Texans. I mean,
Vince
that he
Wilfork
just
could
clogs the
destroy a
gap.
run game just by
Yeah,
himself
I mean,
too.
it's impossible to run on those guys, effectively for sustained number of times.
Yeah.
So like I said, O line not super impressive. How much of it is who you're playing against, and I mean they could come out against the Texans like you said and just run all over them. I mean we don't know.
Yeah. Well, switching from run blocking to pass blocking. So I was looking on Pro Football Focus today, and Bernard Ryman's pass block grade was in I believe, the 79th percentile in the league, which I believe put him, I think, as the 10th or 11th highest graded left tackle out of football. Mind you, he's a second year player who started, I think, maybe 10 games last year, and he is tasked with protecting Richardson's blind side. And that was one of my key points in Saturday's episode was how is Bernard Ryman going to build off of those 6 really good games that he had last season at the end of the year. And all signs currently point to trending way, way up with much more room to improvement, right? Because it takes a truly good left tackle 3 full seasons, I would say, on average, to develop into what they're actually going to be. And with Bernard Ryman already being in the top half in terms of grading, and my eye test, I watched him with several plays on Sunday too. He was steady. Like I think he took Josh Allen to town a couple of times. And
Yeah.
as a second year left tackle, I couldn't be happier, man.
Well, and to your point, you have to have stability at the tackles, especially for pass blocking, but just in offensive line play in general. And I think to go one step even further with Ryman, I think one of the biggest things I've noticed with him is how he looks, man. He looks bigger,
Mm-hmm.
like bulkier. He looks a little bit like more fit. He looks more. He kind of reminds me of Costanzo, man. I mean, he's got that size where he doesn't need to be kind of like your Dwayne Brown that looks like he's just a side of beef, like huge
Keep it in the
guy.
Colts community, old Tart Glenn.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I think we're seeing the emergence of Ryman for sure.
Yeah.
And
And
I think,
there was one metric that really, really impressed me, and it was his first step quickness off the ball or off the line of scrimmage. And I believe that's improved. I believe the math said anywhere from 35 to 40% more efficient than his rookie season, which, man, bless up if that continues to improve.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, health for Ryman and Braden Smith,
Mm-hmm.
continued. But if we need him, I was really impressed in the preseason with Blake Freeland. I think for a rookie, he played very well.
Yeah.
So I think we've got some depth. I have concerns about our overall depth. I don't know that our, swing tack or, our swing guards and things like that are that, where we need them to be in terms of the backups. But tackle wise, we're looking pretty good on the offensive line for the future, in my opinion.
Yep. I would have to agree with you there. Let's see here. Let's go into the receiving. So we mentioned Richardson had 24 completions. Pittman being the receiving end bunts of pretty much a third, quite literally a third of those completions with eight receptions, 97 yards on a touchdown on 11 targets. That 39-yard bubble screen was a thing of beauty. That was a beautifully designed and well executed play.
Yeah, I think you and I texted about that specific play. I mean, that's what I was alluding to earlier when I mentioned, the creativity on offense that you're going to get from Shane Steichen versus predecessors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a new type of offense that we haven't seen a ton of on our side. And that play. I mean, the blocking was incredible. I think we had, I can't remember which lineman was down there throwing blocks way down the field. I
Ryman
mean, it
Q and
was
Ryan
just,
Kelly were 5-10
yeah,
yards down in front of him after he caught them.
somebody was down, and then we had other receivers down there. I mean, it was just a beautiful play altogether.
Yep.
I was very impressed, with that design.
Yeah, I was too. And in the bubble screen like that, or the quick screen, how whatever you want to call it, that was one of the Achilles heels of Frank Reich's offense, because it seemed like that Frank would call anywhere from 7 to 10 wide receiver screens a game, but they wouldn't go anywhere. Like they would just get shoved right at the line of scrimmage, or for a 2 to 4 yard loss, and that would just cause me to flip a chair or a table, and I'd just storm out of the room away from the TV for a couple of plays, just because I was like, why are you calling that play in that situation? Or the design of this was just absolutely terrible, because you tried it again and you got an ineligible man downfield penalty. So that's a huge, excuse me, hats off tip to the or tip of the cap to coaching.
Yeah, yeah. There was a time watching the Colts when screen was like a profanity word. It just never worked for us. But that was, I think we're seeing the design and the tools. We have the offensive linemen that are quick enough to get out there and block on them. That's the hardest part with screens, is getting people in the right position.
Yeah,
So I think it's definitely a bright future, and it's something now that we can look forward to and have some success with, as opposed to being nervous about.
that thank you, bless up to that, because I don't want to get mad like that ever again. Um, so another couple receivers that stood out to me. So Kylan Granson, 4 catches, 39 yards on 6 targets. Josh Downs, 3 catches, 30 yards on 7 targets. Um, those were two players that I had picked to click, and just basic. I said that just because of a gut feeling that I had based off of a reporting that was coming out of training camp and chemistry in preseason, right? So Josh Downs is Anthony Richardson's roommate. I think was both at training camp and most of the preseason. And then Granson, for whatever reason, I know he's had his struggles his first couple years being in the league, but for some reason, the couple of practice footages that I saw, Granson has done nothing but succeed when running those seam routes or the Kelsey routes coming across the middle of the field and sitting right there in the middle in his own defense. And I believe, everyone's looking for that next Travis Kelsey at the tight end position, which, I mean, why wouldn't you? Travis Kelsey is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. And, even in his mid 30s, he's not quick by any means, or is he fast, but he is elusive. And then there's a difference. I mean, you watch a Kansas City Chiefs game, and Travis Kelsey just kind of looks like he's jogging, 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 sits in the middle of the field. Mahomes goes crazy cross body throw, find him, and then Travis Kelsey's just shimming his way 50 yards down the field. And
I
go for it.
No, I was just going to say, just to jump in there. I mean, I think the most critical thing you have to have in a tight end is spatial awareness. I mean, you have to be able to move with the direction of the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're alluding to with Kelsey. He always seems to be in a position where Mahomes can find him when he needs to. And I agree with you. I think, to touch on Granson specifically, I don't think he was utilized very well the last couple of years. I think a big part of his lack of success really didn't have much to do with him. I think, I've racked my brain trying to figure out what the strategy was with keeping only four wide receivers on this roster. And I think what I saw on Sunday is that they're going to treat Granson like a fifth wide receiver,
Yeah, he's gonna be he's
or
gonna be what's called the wire slot tight end.
yeah. And I mean, McKenzie didn't even play at all, I don't think, but other than punt returner. But I think he's going to be that other threat, you know, as opposed to being a a traditional tight end that you might see with Mo Alley Cox or Drew Ogletree.
Yeah,
So I was very impressed with Granson.
yeah, I really enjoyed how Steichen utilized him, because he came in motion quite a bit, and then Steichen would move him to one side of the formation field and then go to the other, or go in and go back out. And I think that was extremely creative and deceptive. Um, because Granson does have really good speed. I think he's got sub 4.6 or 4.55 speed. And as a tight end position, he's 6'3", 250 or something like that. That type of speed at that size is really, really huge in an offense, especially one of Shane Steichen's mastermind creation.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, on the topic of pass catchers, I would even throw in, Granson was fantastic, but Drew Ogletree, up until that cheap shot, in my opinion, hit on him helmet to helmet where it put him in concussion protocol.
Yeah.
I thought he looked great. He had a couple different routes where I could tell he was wide open. He had that one catch, I think it was for 20 yards. That's we heard great things about him last year until he got injured.
Hmm.
I definitely see if we're talking like a Travis Kelsey, he's almost got more of the body type and the size to be kind of our version of Travis Kelsey, and he could block, and so I thought I was extremely excited for him. I was very unfortunate to see him go out with a likely concussion, but hopefully we can get him back sooner rather than later because I think he can be a real weapon for Anthony Richardson in the passing game.
Yeah, and and I'll be curious to see the injury report tomorrow. But based off of initial tests, don't believe that he's going to be on the injury report this week, which is huge.
That's awesome. That's great to hear.
So that'll be good to see. So offensively, as a whole, a lot of excitement. I think
Can I be the bad cop on one guy
be
though?
my
I have to.
guest. Be my guest.
I I I gotta be honest, man. I am so thoroughly unimpressed with Alec Pierce at this point in his Colts career. I don't think he can get open. I think for his size, I don't think he's quick enough to get open off of the defenders. And between the drops that we've seen from him, he had a great touchdown catch, from Matt Ryan last year. That was awesome. But he's also struggled with drops. He had a drop in preseason that was like one of the most beautiful balls I've ever
Oh
seen
yeah, the one in
Anthony
Buffalo.
Richardson throw. Yeah, and I mean, uh, I know that he's capable. We've seen the highlights out of training camp where he caught a 60-yard bomb from Richardson. I think it's just a matter of you at some point you got to put it together in the game. I think it was one reception for 5 yards, three targets. I think the biggest stat there that stands out to me is three targets. Three targets as a wide receiver two in the NFL tells me you can't get open. So I think if anybody needs to play with a chip on their shoulder moving forward this season, we got a long way to go. It could turn quickly. I just think last year was a little tough. This year, preseason, first game, rocky start. I think we need to keep an eye on him to hopefully start to excel a little bit more as the season progresses.
Yeah, and I do agree with you there. However, I'll put this out there real quick. I'm gonna reserve judgment till we get till about week 6 or 7, because last year was Pierce's rookie year, and with the revolving door at quarterback and all the controversy and everything else of the crap shot that ensued last year, you know, I kind of give Alec Pierce a pass because he did flash very occasionally, and the flashes were superb, as you were saying, with that, especially with that big touchdown that he had. I was at that game, and Pierce torched this corner, like absolutely torched him on the
Mm.
release. And it wasn't like the corner was, sitting 3-4 yards off the ball. Like he was up in Pierce's face, and Pierce did a double move at the line of scrimmage and shook him bad. So I think it's there. The more so question for him is how consistent can he be? Can he do it over and over again? And I think that's what you were alluding to. So
Yeah,
I'll reserve
I'm not.
I'll reserve judgment till, like I said, about week 6 or 7, and see where we're at from there. But if this trend continues, then that's when I'm really going to start getting to that questioning point of can he actually play in this offense?
Right. And just to be clear, I think he's capable. I don't know that he has to have the speed that I'm asking of him because there's an overarching theme here. And I've been critical with a couple different players, Deion Jackson, Alec Pierce. The reality is when it comes to the wide receiver core, Alec Pierce is not a wide receiver two in the NFL. We're asking him to do things that I don't think he's going to be, I think he could be a really good third wide receiver. I don't think Michael Pittman Jr. is a wide receiver one. I think he is a fantastic possession receiver that would be a complement to a more explosive wide receiver one.
Hmm.
So I think just a little callback to the Jonathan Taylor situation with, you know, Dolphins fans getting upset that the Colts were asking for Jalen Waddle. I mean, they would be remiss not to because that is exactly what they need. They need an
Well, did you
explosive
see they asked
playmaker.
Green Bay for Christian Watson?
Right. I mean, it's they need an explosive playmaker as a wide receiver one, and I think Pittman Jr. and Pierce can be extremely good complementary wide receivers to have in a stable, but I don't think you're going to see an explosive offense with those two kind of leading the helm. Now, hopefully, Josh Downs, we only saw him for one game so far. Hopefully, he maybe fills in the gap there with some speed across the middle, making some plays down the field. But I think that's where, I'm sort of contradicting myself because, I'm a little bit critical of Alec Pierce, but I don't necessarily think it's his fault either. I think he might be playing out of position. He's getting covered by corners that may not normally be covering him if we had more weapons on offense.
Yeah, time will tell, and you know we'll see as the weeks goes on. Season's just beginning. Got a lot of football left. Real quick here, I want to touch on the defense because the defense kept us in this game. And it wasn't until that you could tell that the exhaustion and the fatigue set in there in the fourth quarter. But this defense, man, I was just my jaw hit the floor a couple of times. And not just with the number of three and outs, but the overall energy that the defense was playing with too. So Zaire Franklin led the way with 18 tackles, 10 of which were solo and a pass breakup. And then Defoe Buckner was an absolute tornado at the line of scrimmage this game. I think he had 7 or 8 total tackles with a sack and a couple other tackles for loss. And that wild touchdown, I don't think anybody in the world had a clue what was going on. But bless up to Zaire Franklin for punching the ball out of Tank Bigsby's hand and nobody knowing that the whistle hadn't blown yet.
Yeah, I was going to say that's why you play to the whistle, folks.
Yes, yes. Don't ever stop until you hear that whistle. Um, but here's the thing, too, is that Pro Football Focus actually graded Zaire Franklin as the number one linebacker in the NFL through week one. EJ Speed, believe it or not, our strong sider Sam linebacker is number three. And then if you go up and down position by position throughout the defensive charts, you will see several Colts players. Buckner and Grover Stewart are each respectively, and I think the top 7 or 8. Kwity Paye was in the top 20 of defensive ends. He had a sack on Sunday, and I know Kwity Paye is a guy that I mentioned on Saturday to a guy that we really need to step up and a guy that really needs to come into his own in year 3 out of Michigan.
Yeah, and I got a lot to touch on here on the defense, but to speak to Kwity Paye specifically, I heard I think it was one of the Colts brought maybe either Matt Taylor or JJ Stankovitz. They mentioned that Kwity Paye had really worked on his body type.
Mm-hmm.
He really came in his first 2 years as a Colt uh, as more of a bull rusher, I guess you would say. And I think he's kind of embracing his size and maybe trimming down to be a little bit more of an edge speed rusher. And I think that's what we need. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we look back to some of the glory days of the Colts defense with, Mathis on one end, Freeney on the other. You know, Mathis was a fast dude. I mean, Freeney got the job done with all his spin moves and everything, but Mathis was quick, man. And I feel like
Yep.
having somebody like that on the edge, opposite of having Defoe and Grover in the middle, they're going to take up space. Get that guy on the outside, helps with contain. I'm really impressed with how he's come along in the last, really at the end of last year. I thought he played well too. So I think he's starting to figure it out. And like you said, I mean, I'm not surprised to hear his PFF grade was way up because I think he looked really impressive. But yeah, man, I mean, for me to dive in here, I got to touch on on Zaire as well because I was so thoroughly impressed with him. Like you mentioned, the number of tackles on his own, I mean, that's crazy impressive. But I'm going to make a proclamation here in week one. I think this is his defense now.
It is.
I love I love Darius, even from a leadership standpoint, not just on the field making the play calls, things like that. Defoe's a monster. Darius Shaq Leonard is a monster. But Zaire, man, he has so thoroughly impressed me the last year and a half. I mean, this is his defense. He is the man making plays. You know, if we can start to get Shaq back to where he's been at in the past, I mean, talk about a 1-2 punch and throw in EJ Speed. I mean, that is an unbelievable linebacking core. So I had to give him some shout out because I think he was by far my most I was most impressed with him on the defense. Despite, I mean, it's hard to say with DeForest. I mean, the guy's unbelievable in the amount of plays that he can make on his own. But um, yeah, man, Zaire was so impressive. And then you know even expanding that into the secondary. I know I listened to you talk on Saturday night about the secondary and the youth. I mean, the number of young guys that we have back there that we're asking to kind of step into a leadership role and jump right in and start right away.
Hmm.
Um, Tony Brown with a pick. I mean, I thought our secondary played very well. I mean, you're gonna.
They
The
played,
reality
they
is,
played as well as they could against what they
yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, that stable of wide receivers, you're going to give up yards. Lawrence is an incredible quarterback. He is very impressive. As much as I hate to say it, because I hated him at Clemson,
had.
and I don't like the Jaguars. The guy is unreal. That touchdown that he threw to Zay Jones was crazy. But I was very impressed with our secondary. I That was one of my biggest question marks coming into the season was the secondary.
Yep.
I saw flashes out of Daryl Baker Jr. In the preseason, but outside of Kenny Moore, trading Gilly away, and I was nervous. I thought we might get torched, and it's a young season. I don't want to hype them up too much. We got a long way to go, but they were very impressive, and the defense as a whole was just extremely impressive in week one.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. The secondary definitely held their own, and asking to contain a Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk and Zay Jones trio, not to mention big 6'5" Evan Ingram at the tight end position. That is a tall, tall task. And I mean, that's not the best receiving core that we're going to face this year, but it's definitely one of the better ones. And to hold them, not really hold them, but contain them within a X amount of yards, because Trevor Lawrence I think passed for less than 250 yards, and to contain them, with the stats that they had. Granted, Calvin Ridley put up pretty good numbers, like a really really good numbers. I think he had 8 or 9 catches for about 110, 115 yards or something like that. But it could have been a lot worse, and I think most people were thinking it was going to be a lot worse.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
I want to give one more guy a shout out too because I felt like, I don't know that the box score reflects it, but I felt like I saw Julian Blackman all over the field on Sunday. It's good to
mhm.
see him back, fully healthy and everything. That was one of my big, you know, things I wanted to keep my eye on for this season was Julian Blackman and Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas, how they were going to play at the safety position. I was extremely impressed with Julian Blackman as well. I thought he played a really good game and he was all over the field.
Yes. I think for our defense to take another step up in development, those guys are going to have to continue playing at a really high level, and I mean I have confidence that they will, because nothing so far. Granted, it's only one game, and I'm not going to get too out of hand with this, but I like what they showed me. And even after that scary collision between Flowers and Kenny Moore there, and I think what was it, the second quarter, they both came back relatively scot free. So hopefully it was just the wind that got knocked out of them. But for them to really lock it down and keep us in the game, not just a testament to them as secondary coverage, but also to the pass rush for getting home and putting pressure on Trevor Lawrence consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I segueing into, I've got it. We've talked a lot of good here. We were very impressed with the defense. I did have one guy on the defense that I was pretty frustrated with. And like we said, game one, long way to go, but Dio Dangbo put up a goose egg. Didn't have a
Yep.
tackle. Michael Pittman Jr. had more tackles than he did in this game when he tackled the defender on the interception
Yes.
return. So I think we got to get, that pass rush depth has to come along. It's capable. I
Mm-hmm.
know he's got the capability. He showed it last year. But we lost some guys in the pass rush in the offseason, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the time to step up. So I'm gonna look for him to see how he develops throughout the rest of the year as well. Tough first game, long way to go. Just one guy I wanted to point to that, not the best of games, but there's a long way to go.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around, why we didn't bring back Yannick Ngakwe, because he was a consistent force last year. I think he put up like 9.5 or 10.5 sacks for us at the Leo or the weak side or the weak side rush. And for us to not bring him back, because I believe he's still a free agent. I mean, we could have brought him back on probably like a 1 year, $8 to $10 million deal. Um, I mean, it's either a combination of he wanted a longer, more lucrative contract, or the Colts brass may just believe in our guys. But right now, I'm having trouble seeing where they're coming from in that aspect. And Dio Dengbo is one of those guys that we need to see. And I know Taekwon Lewis has had a rough past 2, 3 years with injuries. I think is his fifth or sixth season coming out of Ohio State. But he's shown tremendous flash here and there. But he's gotten hurt to where he can't put it together consistently. And he's a guy that I picked to really come on. If he has a full healthy season, I firmly believe that we could see 6 to 10 sacks from Taekwon Lewis.
I agree completely. I'm a big Taekwon Lewis stan. I loved him at Ohio State. Um, I know he's got the capability in him. I mean, what was it? Was it last year or 2 years ago? I mean, he tore his Achilles on like the most freak play while he was returning a
Oh,
fumble.
yeah,
I mean, that's just terrible luck. I mean, that's Paris Campbell level luck. But I think I agree completely. I'm very excited to see what he can do. I thought he played well on Sunday. I saw him around there getting in on some tackles, putting some pressure in the pocket. I agree completely. I think he's a guy who we can really see flourish this year.
for sure. Well, I think overall for the Colts, a lot to be optimistic about, and we've hit on things and players that we want to see improve. Before we kind of get into recent transactions going into this week of practice, um, give me a couple more guys if you have any. One or two that you really were impressed by on Sunday, and some that you again want to see better from.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've alluded to a lot of them. I was extremely impressed. One guy I haven't really touched on, but you did, Michael Pittman Jr. I thought he played great. I mean, he was the shining star of that wide receiver core. I didn't expect much out of Josh Downs week one, but to see the level of comfort that Anthony Richardson had throwing the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. was great to see, because I don't think that any of our quarterbacks last season had that type of connection with what's supposed to be your wide receiver one. So I was extremely impressed with him. Um, in terms of kind of off the wall guys, I was impressed with on offense. I thought, you already alluded to, I thought our tackles played really well. I thought Ryman, I mean, Smith, I thought, it's nice to have him back. I feel like he's been on the shelf at times lately. Um, that was impressive. Q going out, getting injured, and they still kind of held up. I didn't even know he was out because the broadcast was so bad. They didn't tell us for like 6 minutes
I
of game
know.
time. That drove me insane. But I as much guff as I gave the offensive line for the run blocking, I was impressed with their pass blocking, and that starts with the tackles. On the defensive side of the ball, I like I mentioned, I was impressed with the corners. I was impressed with Tony Brown. I was impressed with Daryl Baker Jr. Kenny Moore is always going to be a staple. Um, I think we got some guys. I don't expect us to win a lot of games or be great or make the playoffs, but I think the pieces are there, especially the young guys, and hopefully we can keep some of these key, cogs in the wheel, so to speak, around like the Kenny Moores and the uh, why am I blanking on his name? DeForest Buckner. Those kind of guys, key guys on the defensive line and the secondary that are kind of you know heading towards contract years here in the next year or two. Um, Hopefully we can keep those guys around to help continue to bring these young guys along. But I kind of mentioned all my other guys, Zaire Franklin, really impressed me. Um, I kind of touched on all three of the guys that I thought players who did not, Pierce, Adangbo, Jackson,
Yep.
pretty self-explanatory, but um, only way to go up from last year is up.
Yeah, that that's putting it nicely. That is putting it very nicely. I'll just give mine real quick. So I'll just go with the obvious. My impression or my impressive on offense, Anthony Richardson. We alluded to his stat line. So I actually saw this today, and I was just kind of like, whoa, whoa, okay. He is the first rookie quarterback in NFL history to throw for over 200 yards with a greater than 64% completion percentage and a pass touchdown and a rush touchdown in your NFL debut.
That's impressive, man. I should have clarified. I had him on my impress list. I think I talked enough about him at the beginning of this podcast to
Yeah,
make that
yeah, yeah.
obvious. But yeah, no,
No,
that's. I
I was just
mean,
being
the
Mr.
guy was
Obvious here,
unbelievable.
dang, because everyone loves Anthony Richardson right now, and he's the
Right,
hot Colts topic. So I was just going to dangle a little bit more there.
dangle the carrot.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I think for him, everything was just eye candy because the numbers, while not completely eye popping, he had a 23.4 QBR, which league average is 50. That number I'm not too concerned about right now because, again, I'm just going based off of what my eyes and what my knowledge of the game tells me. And it tells me that
Yeah.
this kid's got it, right? We're going to see nothing but improvements with still, the rookie mistakes in there.
I think I looked at the box score. It was either halftime or sometime through the third quarter. His QBR was like 107.1. I mean,
Yeah,
so
that was his
the
passer rate. He finished with a 79.0 passer rating. That interception
yeah,
tanked it, but I think he would have been closer to 98 if it wasn't for the interception.
yeah.
Again, we don't really need to hit on an offensive player that didn't really impress me too much just because we've covered them. Pearson, Jackson, of course, being the two that stood out most. As for defense, biggest impression for me was DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin. But for me and me personally, and I know this is his first full game in 2 years, but I wanted to see more out of Shaq. I mean, he had 8 tackles on the day, but it didn't feel like. Now, granted, yes, I know he is coming off of a basically a 2 year injury, right? Because it was the ankle, it was the calf, but it was really nerves, pretty much nerves coming from his spinal cord that he had to get alleviated, and it takes nerves a long time to regenerate. I'm just going to make this clear, right? It's week one. I know he's still getting better, but I want to see that explosiveness again from Shaq Leonard. And until I do, I'm still going to have a little bit of doubt.
No, I totally don't. I don't blame you at all. I mean, it was good to see him back out there. I'm just happy he made it through a full game without going out with
Yes.
something else. I mean, when he went out with the concussion in preseason, it's like the piano being dropped from the ceiling, on the cartoon character. It's like, I mean, are you serious?
Yeah.
But no, I agree completely. I have him as one of my biggest storylines moving forward for this year. Is can we see the return of Shaq Leonard? I mean, even if we can get him 80% back to what he was before, that's one of the more formidable linebacker units in the NFL.
Oh, with him and Zaire, no doubt. I mean, because if we can get, Big Z in the and anchoring the middle, and then the maniac room in the outside, free as the will, then whew, don't get me started on what that could look like. Okay. And that, yeah, disappointments on defense. I really didn't have too many. I mean, Odangbo, I need to see more. Man, EJ Speed impressed the crap out of me. I really don't have anything to dog on defensively. They just ran out of gas. Um, but I think we're going to see a lot more from that unit. They've got another, like I said, they've got another test coming up with CJ Stroud in Houston. Stroud being mobile, an accurate passer, and Houston is vastly improved from last year. So we'll see how
Yeah.
it goes.
I do have one more guy that I just thought of, players that stood out. This is way under the radar guy. I think he got a few snaps in on defense, but primarily a special teamer. Grant Stewart, man,
Ooh,
that
I
guy
knew that one
is
was
an
coming.
energizer bunny. I mean,
Troy
I was curious
Polamalu.
last yeah. Well, I was curious last year when we traded for him. Like, I think it was right after training camp last year, and
Yeah.
we traded for him. I'm like, what is this? What's the purpose of this? Is this to help backfill with Shaq or what? And I see now, uh, his presence on special teams and coverage, but also just the fire that he brings. I mean, like I said, I think he played a few snaps towards the end of the game on defense, and I mean, he was in there. I think helped stop on one of the fourth and shorts.
Hmm.
So I mean, yeah, I got to give that guy some credit. I don't know how much run he's going to get, on the first and second team defense, but he's a guy who brings some fire, and that's the kind of thing we need in the locker room.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into real quick here. Let's touch on some roster moves that have happened today. So they added Jake Funk to the 53 man roster after placing Evan Hall on IR. Some practice squad shuffling. So they signed center Jack Anderson, running back Tyler Goodson, and tight end Jordan Murray. And in return, they released three players: running back Jason Huntley, tight end Johnny Lumpkin, and wide receiver Michael Strawn. I know Strawn
I want to
has. Say what?
I want to give a little violin for Mike Strawn. I had him on here as one of my guys to mention. R.I.P. to the Mike Strawn era.
Uh,
A guy with all the potential in the world, and he just unfortunately could not learn the playbook.
well, I don't know if it's not necessarily learning the playbook. I mean, it could be, but he didn't bring any value to special teams. And if you're not going to be in the top four, two, three strings of the depth chart, you need to play special teams. And
Right.
he couldn't provide that. So that's an unfortunate cut. I mean, granted, it is practice squad, but I do hope he catches on somewhere because he does have that talent, and I think he just needs to be given an opportunity.
I think if the Colts could do it all over again, they probably would have kept Desmond Patman and maybe let Strawn walk last year. I
Yeah,
think that was I I thought Dez looked great against us. Granted it was preseason with the Bills, but um, yeah, that's one of those where I had such high hopes for him 2 years ago with Strawn, and it just never really panned out. But you're gonna have that sometimes.
for sure. Well, I don't think there was actually much more than that. Practice tomorrow and Thursday with walkthrough on Friday. We'll see the practice report, see the injury report. Um, think we're going to try and aim to do another episode 4 on Friday going into the weekend. Um, should be a very interesting one to dissect. I think what we'll do is we'll go through um, Colts practice reports. We'll see kind of what their injury report looks like, and then getting into the Houston Texans a little bit, what we can expect from them, and a new era in Houston with D'Amico Ryans at the helm. Which, if you watch them on Sunday, they played with a lot of energy. Granted, they didn't come out with the win, but I think Houston has a lot to look forward to, and they might become another thorn in the AFC South.
Yeah, I mean, I expect D'Amico Ryan's. I expect good defense. Doesn't matter who they got on that side of the ball. I think he's a great defensive mind. They're going to be a difficult opponent to move the ball on, and then I'm really curious, to see what CJ Stroud can do. So looking forward to discussing that later this week as we move into week 2.
For sure. Well, that'll conclude today's episode of Undertaking the Colts. It is Blake Waters and Jordan Brock. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Stay safe, everybody.